Well, hello again, and it's nice to be back. Actually, today I'm going to share a story that I read a few weeks back, and it's become one of my favorites. It's just very inspiring, I find, and it was challenging as well. It's a true story of a family in 1946. So there was a woman that was left a widow with 7 children. At the time the story was written, the older children had been married and left home. She was left with 3 girls at the house. And one Sunday, their pastor announced at church that they would be collecting money to give as an offering for a poor family on Easter Sunday. This was a month before, so they were given a month. He encouraged the church to save and give sacrificially to bless this family with a special offering Easter Sunday. And so this family was very excited about how they could participate in this blessing. And so they talked about it all the way home from church and talked about different ways, different things they could do. Well, the first thing they did is they bought 50 pounds of potatoes. They thought, well, if this could feed us for 1 month, 50 pounds of potatoes, so we're going to save $20 in groceries. So that's a good chunk right there. And then they thought about different ways they could earn. So they did some house and yard cleaning and babysitting, and they were teenage girls, so they just really got busy and creative. And they made crafts. They started making all these pot holders, and they made another $20 with that. And they just got really busy. And every day they would count up their money and talk about the different ways that this family would be able to enjoy the money. Now there were about 80 people at the church, and so they thought, wow, we should get a sizable offering. This is really exciting. So the day before Easter came, and they counted up all their money, and they had $70, 70. It's a lot of money back then for 1946. And so they were just so excited they could hardly sleep. They didn't care that they didn't have new clothes for Easter. I'm sure they were well aware of this because everybody gets new clothes for Easter, right? Especially little girls. But they just couldn't wait to get there. And of course it was raining that day. They had no umbrella. They walked about a mile to church. But that didn't dampen their spirits. One of the girls had holes in her shoes. They put cardboard in there and her feet still got wet, but that was okay. And when they were at church, they heard the other teenage girls talking about the Smith girls and their old clothes. They didn't have new dresses, but yet they felt so rich. Anyways, they put all their money in the offering. And they sang as they walked all the way home after church. They had eggs and potatoes for lunch. And later that afternoon, a car pulled up in the driveway. And yes, you guessed it. The pastor showed up with an envelope in his hands for this family, gave it to the mom. So the first thing you think, wow, wonderful, how exciting. They must have been so happy. But that's really not how the story goes at all. That's not how they thought. Listen to this. So the mom comes in. She's very quiet. They count the money. There was $87. They gave 70 of that. 80 people in the church. There was $87. And they put the money back in the envelope, and they were just very, very quiet. They'd gone from feeling like millionaires to poor trash. And I'm going to share with you how the story goes now from one of the girls that writes this story. I can't tell it as well as she recounts it. So she says, we kids had such a happy life that we felt sorry for anyone who didn't have a life like ours, and a house full of brothers and sisters and other kids visiting constantly. We thought it was fun to share silverware and see who would get the spoon or the fork. They only had 2 knives, so they had to pass it around to whoever needed it. She goes on to say, I knew we didn't have a lot of things that other people had, but I had never thought we were poor. That Easter day, I found out we were. The minister had brought us the money for the poor family, so we must be poor. I didn't like being poor. I looked at my dress and worn out shoes and felt so ashamed that I didn't want to go back to church. Everyone there probably already knew we were poor. I thought about school. I was in the 9th grade and at the top of my class of over 100 students. I wondered if the kids at school knew we were poor. I decided I wanted to quit school. We sat in silence for a long time. Then it got dark and we went to bed. All that week, we girls went to school and came home and no one talked much. It was a quiet week, right? Finally, on the Saturday, Mama asked us what we wanted to do with the money. What did poor people do with money? We didn't know. We'd never known. We were poor. We didn't want to go to church on the Sunday, but we had to. Although it was a sunny day, we didn't talk on the way. Mom started to sing, but no one joined in. At church, we had a missionary speaker. And he talked about how churches in Africa made buildings out of sun-dried bricks, and that they needed money to buy roofs. He said $100 would put a roof on a church. And so the pastor of the church asked the people to give sacrificially to help these poor people. So of course they knew, Mom and the girls knew right away what they were to do with that money. And gladly, the mom reached into her purse, took out the envelope, gave it to the girls. Of course, they put it in the offering. When the offering was counted, the minister announced that it was a little over $100. The missionary was excited. He hadn't expected such a large offering from such a small church. He said, "You must have some rich people in this church." Suddenly it struck us. We had given $87 out of that little over 100. We were the rich family at the church. Hadn't the missionary said so? As I grew older, our decision that day to place the money we had been given back in the offering stuck with me. When we followed God's way and gave the best that we had, we realized we had riches far greater than anything this world's money could buy. And so I just found this story so inspiring. And it reminds me of another story in Luke 2 of course, the widow and the two mites, and how Jesus contrasted the giving of the poor from the giving of the rich. From the poor, it was a sacrifice. The rich gave from their abundance, and of course, this widow gave from her need. And so we see here how they were so blessed to give. And how they didn't see themselves poor. It's really about perspective and not looking at what we have by world standards. In their eyes, they were rich. And so I just want to encourage us all to remember that though we may not be rich by world standards, we are rich in those things that money cannot buy. We are always rich. And so my prayer is that you would be inspired by this story to give sacrificially, to give generously and joyfully, and to experience the blessing that comes with giving that is always greater than that of receiving. So with that, I leave you and I say be blessed, be rich in the Lord and in the joy of the Lord, and have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.